At this time, I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Lauren Brown. Lauren is a Ewing survivor and a warrior, battling the disease twice. Lauren's oncologist, Dr. Mary Ellen Cavalier, shared the following. A prime example of Lauren's character is her concern for others, even while learning to cope with the knowledge that her life would be forever changed by their diagnosis. Even while coping with the side effects of chemotherapy, hair loss, extreme nausea, and vomiting, Lauren was and still is a source of encouragement to other patients in their cancer journey. Lauren is a true cheerleader and inspiration. Please join with me in welcoming Lauren.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, is that better? When Mrs. Basso first spoke to me about giving this speech tonight, we talked about it being positive and upbeat because tonight is a celebration. I was thinking about that as I was writing my speech, and I couldn't help but find it ironic. 3 years ago, I would have never thought you could give an upbeat speech about a teenager's battle with cancer. Everyone knows that being diagnosed with cancer is a life-changing experience, but that isn't always a bad thing. I now know that it's possible for it to change your life for the better. I was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma on June 16, 2010. Like most 15-year-old girls, my definition of devastating was bad grades and breakups. When I was diagnosed, I didn't even cry until I found out I would lose my hair because at that moment in time, losing my hair was the worst possible thing that could happen to me. My reality check came in the form of chemotherapy only a few days later. When I went home after my first round, I was too sick to move. After passing out multiple times and throwing up water, I remember telling my mom that I could not do 13 more rounds. My innocent 15-year-old self decided I'd simply tell the doctor we'd do something else. Well, Dr. Cavalier set me straight. She proceeded to explain to me, in the nicest of ways, of course, that without treatment, I would die. I think that was the first time I actually realized what I was up against. Looking back on my journey, I can pinpoint 3 defining moments. 3 moments that have made me the person you see today. This was the first. At that moment, it was also apparent to me that this was not only serious, but it was uncertain. I could do a whole year of awful treatments and still not make it to my senior year of high school. That was a harsh reality for me, but it was a huge change in my perspective and my attitude. At such a young age, I had to make a choice to fight, and I mean literally fight, for my life. After that, my chemo rounds got a little bit easier. They weren't necessarily easier on my body, but I got through them, knowing that each one was a small step towards kicking cancer's butt. And let me tell you, after a summer of having Ewing sarcoma, I was ready to kick cancer's butt. 5 rounds later, it was time for me to have surgery to remove my tumor. My tumor was in my pelvic bone, and we later found out that it was in a very tricky location that most surgeons wouldn't operate on. Since most of you don't know me, I'm not sure there's an accurate way to describe the passion I had for competitive cheerleading. I had loved to stunt and tumble since I was 5 years old. My mom says I didn't walk, I cartwheeled everywhere. My wardrobe consisted of shirts that said eat, sleep, cheer, and cheerleading is life. When my parents told me we were moving from California to Texas, I started bawling, afraid there wouldn't be cheerleading in Texas. Little did I know that the competitive cheer world was a whole different one than Pop Warner. I continued to cheer for 11 years up until I was diagnosed. I've competed in every major national competition in the U.S. and had dreams of cheering in college. When we spoke to Dr. Casas, my surgeon, I asked if I'd be able to tumble again. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Lauren, I'm going to work really hard to make sure you can walk across a college campus someday." As straightforward as this answer was, my selective hearing heard, "No problem, if you can walk, you can tumble." I swear I never heard him repeatedly say the words massive surgery, although my parents say they couldn't get the words out of their heads. The one thing he did tell us was that if he had to get too close to the hip to get clear margins, he'd have to replace my hip as well. Although the hip replacement isn't nearly as big of a deal as the hemipelvectomy, It would be a surgery that would definitely prevent me from ever competing again. Armed with this reality, I went in for my 12-hour surgery, unsure of what would be waiting for me on the other side. Now, for those of you who have never had a surgery, let me explain that when you wake up, it's very confusing and very chaotic. At least it was for me. I had my surgery at Presby Dallas, but as soon as I was awake, they were preparing to transfer me to the Children's Medical Center ICU. After such an enormous surgery, trying to move me onto the transport gurney and load me into an ambulance took an army and a lot of pain medicine. In the midst of all the chaos, I turned to my dad, and with tears in my eyes, I mumbled, "My hip?" I think part of me already knew the answer, but my heart broke when my dad just started to cry. That first night in the ICU was hard. I was heartbroken about losing cheerleading, and I was scared about all the work I had ahead of me. That night, my dad read me the guest book post from my Caring Bridge page. So many people had posted such kind and uplifting words, and I definitely owe making it through that first night to them and to them. I was in the hospital for a month afterwards, and although my parents did their best to cheer me up, I was still in a funk when I finally broke out of there and went home. I was in a wheelchair, sleeping in our downstairs guest room, and trying to find the motivation that I had been missing since surgery when one night I finally broke down. I spent a good deal of time that night yelling at God and ended up crying myself to sleep. Strangely enough, it actually seemed to help. When I woke up, something had changed in my head, and I had an idea to find one positive thing in every day. This was my second defining moment because it changed my life. At first, I had to think each night to come up with a positive, but eventually it came more naturally. Today, I strive to appreciate the positives as they happen, and it has truly made me a happier person because as I have realized, happiness is a choice. With my motivation and normal upbeat spirit back in place, I continued with my physical therapy and chemo. After 9 more rounds of chemo and 28 radiation treatments to my hip, I was done. It was the end of my junior year, and I couldn't wait to be a regular teenager again. I was excited to hang out with my friends for the summer and to apply for colleges in the fall. After a wonderful summer, I returned to school and began my senior year of high school. I was taking 12 college dual credit hours, working to catch up on high school classes, and had just started my new job at IKEA when I went in for my 6-month scans. My scan showed 4 small spots in my lungs, but because I didn't have metastasis originally, they hoped I had a simple infection. They put me on antibiotics and planned to scan me again in a month. When I went back in October, I wasn't worried. Nobody had ever been concerned about my lungs before, so I knew it couldn't be bad. After my scans, I spent the day with one of my friends and barely noticed that my parents hadn't called all day. I texted and called them a few times with no answer. Dr. Cavalier was always amazing about calling us the same day with scan results, so I found it a little strange when my mom and my stepdad Mike hadn't called to tell me the good news. Finally, Mike called me back. On my way to our high school football game, I asked Mike how my scans were. I'll never forget his voice telling me that the spots were still there, and they were bigger. Shortly after, I had the biopsy that confirmed it. My lungs were filled with small round blue cells, something a Ewing's warrior never wants to hear. There's a fairly set protocol for Ewing's the first time around, but a second battle with Ewing's is different for every person. My doctors were scrambling to find an option, any option. Because my hip was still clear, it meant that the tumors in my lungs had been there all along, too small to see. That means that these 4 nasty tumors had survived all 14 rounds of awful chemotherapy. They knew chemo wouldn't kill them, and all over, low dose of radiation would not likely be strong enough. And surgery was not a first choice, because in the surgeon's words, it would make the hip surgery look like a cakewalk. Dr. Cavalier and Dr. Timmerman, my radiation oncologist, came to us with another option. It had only been done once before on a Ewing's patient, and they couldn't find enough records to know if it had even worked. But realistically, it was our only option. I did 9 rounds of stereotactic radiation that delivered a very high dose of radiation to just the tumors instead of the whole lung. Feeling confident and praying for the best, I did 12 more rounds of chemo, which I finished last August. Now, if you remember, I told you it was my senior year of high school. I was taking 12 college hours, and I had a job at IKEA. My third defining moment, which most of my nurses still call me crazy for, was deciding to continue all of these things during my treatment. I was very sick during my first course of treatment, and I rarely could do the things that I wanted to. This third defining moment, as simple as it sounds, was the choice to live my life. I did my best to take advantage of the days I felt well and to do what I could the days I didn't. There were days I went straight from chemo to work, feeling so sick I wasn't sure if I'd make it through my shift. However, I always wanted to try, because every shift that I made it through was one small victory over chemo and over cancer. And I made it through most of my shifts. I finished treatment less than a month before my first day of college, but I decided that I wanted to go right away. Many people told me I should take a semester off, but they didn't understand. Going away to college had always been a dream of mine, and I had been looking forward to it since grade school. I had been counting down until the day I would pack up my car, move away from home, and embrace my freshman year all on my own. I wasn't going to let cancer take that away from me. I've just finished my freshman year at Texas A&M University, and what an experience it's been. I love being healthy enough to be on my own. No offense, Mom and Mike. I love getting to learn in a classroom full-time again, and I love being an Aggie. I would never choose to have cancer again, but I really don't regret having it. The experiences that I've had have made me a better, more positive person. They've given me the strength to overcome, courage to persevere, and the knowledge to know what's truly important. Although there were many uncertainties with my surgery and my radiation, there are two things that I'm sure you all noticed today. One, I can walk. And more importantly, two, I'm still here. I thank God for that every day, and I thank God for the opportunity to be in college, one of my lifelong dreams. I plan to live every single day of my life to the fullest because who knows what my next scans may show. Now, as an Aggie, I feel obligated to end this speech by saying thanks and giggle.